It's really weird. Just standing here in a tie, listening to Charlotte, who I've known for quite a long time as well, and recognising already what we've heard and about the realities of life for all of us as people, but clearly, particularly in relation to young people, where we have these images in our minds, so often dictated to us by things that go on in the media and all that we often read, that everybody lives perfect lives, and that somehow any of us that struggle at different times is somehow already feeling that we're failing in some way. For me, it's really important to articulate that right at the beginning, because one of the things that's really important to me in my role, Tim, Chief Exec of Young Devon, is that it's exactly that. It's a role. Primarily, I'm Tim, a person that has ups and downs in my life, present, past, probably in the future. And for me, my ability to deal with those issues is heavily dependent on those people around me that I look to for support, for guidance, for help, encouragement, sometimes giving me a hard time. Emotional ill health is no respecter of age, wealth, status, or circumstance, and all of us have hit times when we struggled a little or a lot. When we are physically unwell, our defence cells rush forward and start repairing the damage, and when we are emotionally unwell, many of us find friends, family, colleagues are there to help us and repair us and help us build up our resilience again. Sadly, a number of young people we come into contact with are not so fortunate to have that support system around them. And as a result, Young Devon has worked relentlessly alongside many of you here today. It's really great to see so many people who I work with day in, day out, week in, week out, and some of you year in, year out, really trying to make a difference, so that we can ensure that any young person in need of help can do so in a range of ways that makes a real difference at the time when they need it most. When I worked more in the front line with young people, what became really clear to me was that we can set all these aspirations and say, yes, we can create services and develop approaches that young people can engage with, but unless we also recognise some of the real barriers that young people face when they are struggling, that are real for them and real for all of us, those barriers such as ignorance, just not knowing who's out there that can actually give some help and support. For some, it'll be the shame or the guilt around a particular experience they've gone through, because they don't necessarily have a chance to get a reality check that actually what they're feeling and how they're feeling is okay. And many of us feel like that as well, and it can be quite transient until we can move through to the other side. For some other young people, it's just fear of talking to somebody else as to what will happen next. They hear from their mates, if you do that, this will happen. So often information young people are given, sadly, is not always the best quality. So it is critical that we create ways in which we can reassure young people that there is a level of unconditionality about the sense that it's okay at times to struggle, because we all do as human beings. And actually, by making that first step and talking to somebody else, you're already halfway to actually looking down a potential different pathway to the only one that you might have in your mind, which might be a negative one. And for me personally, key to development of that, and as Barbara says, gone back a fair old while. I originally started working in a youth inquiry service, as it was then, in Plymouth 20 years ago, now the Zone, as a place of contact for any young person, because we know, however hard we all work to create those pathways for young people that are struggling, we know also that sometimes, because of those barriers, that sometimes we in the voluntary sector are able to create that informal link in a way that allows them to build up courage in order to actually address something, and if it really is something that needs an extra layer of help, to really help broker them in or advocate on their behalf so that they get the level of help that they need at the time that they need it. Because so often, many of the young people we come into contact with, if only they had spoken a bit earlier to somebody that they trusted, perhaps the acute difficulty they're now experiencing might not have happened. No guarantees, but we know, and research has shown this time and time again, the sooner any of us address anything that we're struggling with, the more likely it is that we find a solution that allows us to move forward and grow. And so for us, the establishment of a network of youth inquiry services, places of access around whether it's information, advice, advocacy, counselling, a place where young people just cross a threshold, talk to somebody in confidence. It might be something really simple, but to them it could be massive, and all they need is that little nugget of information and they get on with their lives. But for those other young people, it's a significant problem. Sadly, we know in our work within the S centres that huge percentages of young people cross our thresholds because they're about to be homeless, because they've reached a point in their life of crisis. We heard from Keith the stats showing that relationships with family is one of the most prevailing reasons why young people are asking for help. And for some, it's reached that point of crisis where it is too late. The door has been shut, either because they shut it or it's been shut on them. And so much of our work is actually trying to say, of course, we can look at other options, but ideally, if we can find a way of patching things up at home, let's get back home, because actually being out there at 16 or 17, living on your own in unsupported housing, in an environment where you might feel it could be quite hostile, is not really the desirable place for any young person to be at that age. More and more young people are staying at home longer, but sadly for a small minority, that is not a choice. So for us, it's been absolutely key to make sure that, yes, of course, together with so many other people, we work really hard to try and make sure that wherever we can, young people stay at home. But we've also got to make sure, for those who can't, that they do have a safe place to live. That they have a safe place to live where there are people around, where they can build relationships of trust, where they can move forward. And clearly, over the past decade or so, Young Devon, we now have reached the point where every night we accommodate about 200 young people. And that's through a whole mixture. But key to that has been drawing in people from the community who have said, actually, I've got room in my home, I've got a space which I can create, I've got some time which I can give, and through the supportive lodgings that now is created, many young people who previously perhaps struggled in a particular situation, they now have that benefit of living within a family situation, which for some of them is exactly what they want and need, and doing it in a way that makes a difference. And obviously, from my point of view, I'm really proud to be standing here saying that is now something that's in place.